Hello, welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Prime Minister Modi is set to visit US for his first state visit from the 21st to the 24th of June. The last state visit took place during the visit of Manmohan Singh in 2009. The Prime Minister will receive an official welcome at the White House, hold a bilateral meeting and delegation-level talks with President Biden. President Biden will also host a state dinner in honor of Prime Minister Modi. An address to the Indian community is also on the cards. Among the deliverables, there will be agreements on trade, defense and critical minerals. A significant progression of the Indo-US defense partnership will be the signing of a joint production agreement. Ahead of this visit, the Biden administration is likely to give a go-ahead to General Electric to produce jet engines to power Indian military aircraft in India. How important will this deal be for the Indian defense sector, and what will be the importance of talks on critical minerals? Joining us now to take all of this forward is Ambassador Arun Singh, former Indian envoy to the United States, and Mukesh Aghi, President of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Mr. Aghi, if I can begin with you, I believe you have some breaking news for us in terms of the Prime Minister's joint address to both houses of the Congress.
Yeah, I confirm right now, 2 minutes ago, White House basically released the letter inviting the Prime Minister, along with the minority speaker and the majority speaker, to have a joint session addressed by the Prime Minister. And I think that's significant because for the first time, you have an Indian Prime Minister speaking twice to the joint session. So that sends a very strong message. You have a Democratic president inviting him for a White House state dinner, and you have a Republican Speaker of the House inviting him to have a joint session speech. It's a bipartisan support to the visit, and it's a strong message to the government of India.
Right. Ambassador Arun Singh, coming to you now, this is Prime Minister Modi's first state visit. We've also heard this will be one of the longest state visits for any leader to the United States, as Prime Minister Modi will be spending 3 nights there. How crucial is this visit for Indo-US ties? How important is this for Prime Minister Modi and President Joe Biden?
So the fact that this is a state visit is an important signal that the US has given in terms of how they see the India relationship. Because state visits at that level of protocol are very rare in the US system. For example, if you take the Biden presidency, it's been 2.5 years since he became president. And the Indian Prime Minister will only be the 3rd state visitor of the Biden administration. But the first was President Macron in December last year. And then we had the South Korean president who was there in April. So that's one important dimension. And again, if you look at it historically, the Indian Prime Minister would be the only 3rd Indian leader ever invited for a state visit to the US. There was President Radhakrishnan in 1963, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, as you mentioned, in 2009, and the Indian Prime Minister. So in terms of the protocol, of course, it's very, very important, and the signaling. But the fact remains that the Prime Minister has been to the US several times since 2014 for bilateral visits, official bilateral visits, for multilateral visits, where he had bilateral meetings with the US President. He was there in September 2021, when there was also a Quad meeting convened at that time. So there have been regular visits, but it's a signal that now they're doing a state-level visit. And there will be, I'm sure, very important personal gestures done during the visit as a signal of the importance they attach to the relationship and the importance of the relationship with the Indian Prime Minister.
All right. Mr. Aghi, coming to you, there has been a lot of talk about the deal between General Electric and an Indian entity to jointly produce jet engines for military aircraft in India. How crucial is that deal? What is the current stage where the deal is at, according to you?
Well, this is very significant. You have to understand there are only 4 countries which produce hot jet engines. And that's France, and that's United States, UK. Not even China produces hot jet engines. So I think to transfer that technology to India and co-manufacture with HAL sends a very strong message. And you have to understand, a jet engine compromises almost 30% cost of a plane. And so if you can produce jet engines, you can design frames around the jet engines itself. So I think it's very significant. The stage is basically, first you have to get both the state approval, Commerce Department approval, DOD approval, then the White House has sent to the Congress for approval. So that process is continuing, and at some stage, both GE and HAL have to sit down and also work out the commercial agreement between the two companies. But the momentum is moving the right direction, and if that happens and it gets announced, it sends a very strong message that the ties between India and US have gone beyond the commercial deal. Now they're working on transferring technology, which is critical to India's growth strategy also.
So you're saying that the HAL being confirmed as a joint production partner, that has already been agreed upon, Mr. Aghi, according to you?
So my understanding is HAL has been basically working on some of the GE earlier part of the version of the engines itself. So they are in discussion. Have they finalized the details? Not yet. They're still working on that. But I think it's important to understand it's not just this technology itself. This is just the beginning of multiple other technologies which will be transferred to India. So India becomes much more self-sufficient in defense technology and civil aviation technology and become less reliant on Russia and other platform itself.
Right. Coming to you, Ambassador Arun Singh, the agreement on critical minerals, how important would that be when it comes to the deliverables of this visit?
Parikshit, before I respond to your question, just wanted to add a couple of thoughts to what Mukesh said on the GE jet engine technology. And in addition to the points he mentioned, that if this deal goes through, it will be significant. One, because in 2014, India and the US had done the agreement on defense, trade and technology initiative. And one of the criticisms was that no major technology transfer arrangement could be worked out at that time. Now, since then, of course, the US in 2016 declared India a major defense partner. And then in 2017, President Trump placed India on strategic trade authorization level 1, which means highest level technology releases that the US does to its closest allies. So in a sense, steps were being taken. And in January this year, India and US launched a new initiative for a partnership in critical and emerging technologies. Artificial intelligence, quantum, cyber, 6G, biotech, commercialization of space, semiconductors, signaling that they want to take the partnership to a notch higher in terms of technology collaboration. So given that, and in that statement that was put out after that meeting, there was a specific reference on how the US administration will try and process the GE engine proposal. So if it goes through, I think it will be another signal that the US is advancing the relationship with India to another level of technology partnership. So given that, I think what you mentioned, the partnership for critical minerals, of course, will be important, but even more important would be advancing this partnership on critical and emerging technologies, because these technologies are going to transform completely the way we live, the way we work. And if we are able to partner with each other in these cutting-edge technology areas, then we will be able to create new opportunities for production, new opportunities for trade, and that will be very significant.
Right. Mr. Aghi, give us a sense of the conversation taking place on critical minerals. What has been the industry chamber's view and recommendations to both governments as to what should be the next steps in terms of operationalizing the agreement, the talks on critical minerals and technology?
Well, let's take one example, which is lithium. And if India is going to commit to 2070 a zero carbon environment, it needs to be able to not only mine, but process and come up with some of the renewable technology through lithium itself. And today, if you look at almost 90% of that environment is controlled by China. United States is worried about that. Europe is worried about that. So is India worried about that. So I think it's important that both countries work out the process, the technology transfer, just on one aspect of lithium processing and building into a battery environment. It is a win-win value proposition. India just announced that it discovered large lithium environment in the state of Kashmir. So I think it's important we leverage a lot of those technology, bring them to India, and become a processing center, not only just for India itself, but for Europe and Western Europe itself.
Right. Ambassador Arun Singh, my final question. The GE deal, as Mr. Aghi is being pointing out that it may happen with HAL, if this does go through, what kind of a signal does it send to China?
I think the purpose is not just China. The purpose is to advance the US-India partnership because both countries are invested in each other for also the strength in the bilateral relationship. You know, the US-India trade is about $191 billion. It has increased more than 7 times in the last 20 years. And US remains India's largest partner. So also, I think there is a sense in India for the kind of aspirations we have in terms of manufacturing, in terms of production, technology, US will remain a very important partner. So I think the first is to enable ways so the aspirations of the Indian people for development can be brought about. So I think you should keep that in mind. And as far as the signal to China is concerned, I think it's the broader India-US relationship, because the US has now said on a number of occasions that it sees the rise of India to be in US interest. It sees India as a net security provider in the region. It sees India as a very important partner in the context of the Indo-Pacific. So the GE deal will be just one element in that to show that the two countries are ready to take technology partnership, defense technology partnership to another level, which will deepen the overall relationship between them. And again, the US has said that you know, even if India doesn't take an overtly anti-China position, even if India is not an ally as such of the US, but a strategic partner, a strong India in itself is a deterrent to China's unilateral and aggressive posturing in South China Sea, East China Sea, along the LAC and elsewhere.
We are going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. We will be discussing the BRICS foreign ministers meeting that has been held in South Africa. Foreign ministers of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa have called for rebalancing of the global order away from the West. A detailed discussion when we're back. Welcome back. A crucial meeting of BRICS foreign ministers has been held in South Africa. The foreign ministers of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa have called for rebalancing of the global order away from the West. On the agenda was a discussion on enlarging the membership of the bloc. The ministers discussed both formal and informal applications of at least 20 nations, including Africa, Latin America, the Middle East and Asia, with a list of interested nations including Egypt, Nigeria, Mexico, Iran, Indonesia and Turkey. The meeting is also taking place in the background of the Russia-Ukraine war and the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for President Putin. South Africa, as a member of the International Criminal Court, would be obliged to arrest Putin if he attends the BRIC summit in Johannesburg in August. This has prompted South Africa to consider moving the meeting to another venue or another country. Joining me now to discuss this is former Ambassador Anil Trigunath and Dr. Shrikant Kondapalli, Dean at School of International Studies. Let me go across to our guest now. Ambassador Trigunath, beginning with you. How do you see this enlargement of BRICS, which has been on the table now for some time? We have seen nations calling for it. And what is the message that is going out to the West and other nations?
You see, Parikshit, the world has been basically in a transitional mode or in a transitional disorder at the moment. And that has been further accentuated both by these two black swan events. One is the pandemic, the other one has been the Russia-Ukraine war, whose impact is being felt by the global south mainly. So the countries in Asia and Africa and Latin America are the countries who have suffered the most. And the BRICS has been a silver lining in that sense, and which has been trying to continue on the right path dealing virtually all these issues which are dealt in any major multilateral organization exactly in the same manner, but in a bit more efficiently. And therefore, the attraction of the BRICS has continued to increase among various members. And when they are seeing that the world seems to be much more divided, there is a more unilateralism that is happening on the part of the superpowers, there is definitely a sense of creating alternate structures, be it in the financial domain or be in the multilateral domain. So I see that this BRICS expansion has been on the cards for quite some time now, but this is becoming a greater reality because as these countries, they are not necessarily going to be a block against the West. That is not what I guess at the moment is the intent, even though China and Russia are very much part of it. But at the same time, this will provide an alternative in the financial architecture also, which is what they are aiming at. As you have seen in the joint statement, there is a sign that we should deal in our national currencies and we should try it among the BRICS members and with our other trading partners. So definitely there is a move which is taking place with regard to de-dollarization, I would say. And so an alternate architecture is in the offing. It will take some time, but it is very much there. So I think that the BRICS would be a good platform to look at for many countries. And you mentioned about 20, somebody mentioned 30, even several of them from the European countries, as if you were to believe the Africans, they have also shown interest in being part of it. So we have to see how it plays out.
Right. Right. How would you describe this expansion of BRICS, Professor Kondipalli? How does India stand to gain from this exercise?
Well, last year, July 24th, the Russians made an announcement about the expansion after the Iranians and Saudi Arabians have applied for. And later on, Turkey and Egypt, Argentina, and a host of other countries, Indonesia, Mexico, Thailand, Afghanistan, they have also expressed their interest in joining. So that was the lead coming from Russia first. Second, the Beijing declaration last year mentioned about the possible expansion. So by September this year, when the summit meetings takes place in South Africa, that probably will be included, number one. Number two, the expectation is that there will be a lot of changes to the global governance. Economic arrangements because all these countries, Saudi Arabia, for example, which is one of the biggest energy exporter, and Turkey, many motor vehicles are produced there. Then you have Iran, again, an energy exporter, and also gold in this times of turmoil. And you have also the Argentinians who produce a lot of soybeans and other raw materials. So each of these countries, Indonesia is a big maritime country. So if they are added to the BRICS, then it would increase the profile of the BRICS. So that was the expectation after the Beijing declaration. So how does India fare in this process? The BRICS has one country, one vote system, and based on consensus approach. So even if one country opposes the expansion program, it is unlikely to happen in this. So consensus is very important here. After the Fortaleza meeting, this one country, one vote system has been adopted. So that is very crucial. But of course, all countries have not been opposing the expansion of the membership. Each one has their own considerations. In the case of India, the suggestion was that if you have more countries from South America, Africa, Asia, then the global South position could be strengthened, and hence the G20 process as well gets strengthened, number one. Number two, also because of the conflict in Ukraine, there is the energy, fuel, the fertilizers, food prices, they have increased, inflation has increased. So by including many of these countries, there will be some kind of pressure, both in terms of the IMF reorganization, which has been continuing since 2010 reorganization process. with India and China's share has been increased substantially, some 2-3%, not so substantial, but nevertheless it's significant. And also in terms of the participation in global governance structures. In terms of recalibration of the global economic governance by this larger representation, so it's kind of a pressure group, and also participating in the international decision-making processes. Because these countries have huge resources and this could probably even translate into political power. So that is also one Indian consideration. If you remember in Goa summit, the BIMSTEC was been added as a dialogue partner in the previous BRICS summit meeting held by India at that time. And so it is not a new idea for India in terms of expanding. Of course, there are concerns as well that the BRICS will lose its steam if you have too many countries. So that is one criticism that has been raised. Also, each of these participants are pushing their own
Dr.
choices. Yeah.
Right. Dr. Kodapalli, I'm going to come back to that point. Ambassador Trigunayat, this expansion of BRICS and the kind of countries that Dr. Kondapalli was talking about, Iran, Indonesia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia wanting to join BRICS, this enlargement of the BRICS, how will this be seen and taken by the US, by European Union, by UK for that matter?
Well, I think that if they are going to look at this BRICS from the perspective of China, Russia combined, then they will have this sort of a geopolitical color to it. On the other hand, if they were to look at it that these are the countries where the economies are doing very well, at the same time, they are not at the moment in opposition to the United States per se or its policies, but they definitely do not endorse the idea of unilateral sanctions and the unilateralism in the international discourse. Then obviously this will convey a certain kind of a message, because most of these countries which have been listed here are 12 or 13 or 15 countries actually here. Not all are going to become members in the first time, but the Saudis, for example, is one of the richest countries, the biggest economy, the largest producer of the oil. And that way it is an important addition to the thing. And then currently the whole world has been facing this, the problem of the 4F, as we call it, weaponization of the 4Fs, which is weaponization of the financial instruments, the food, fuel, and fertilizer. These are the needs of the global south. And if these countries, which are in the global south in one way or the other, are going to combine their energies and somehow find a synergy of sorts, be it in the market form or be it in the other collaborative instruments, then it will definitely can provide some kind of an alternate architecture, which need not necessarily be in conflict with the United States or the West, and perhaps temper them down as well.
Right. We've run out of time, but Dr. Kondapalli and Ambassador Trigunayat, thank you very much for joining us here on Global Eye, giving us your view on the BRICS summit that is taking place in South Africa, the foreign ministers meeting that is taking place, and the enlargement of BRICS that is on the table as well. That's all we have time for here on Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.